Hello and welcome to the Procurement Podcast, brought to you by BizClick and our sponsors for this series, Amazon Business. This is your go-to podcast for all things procurement. If you're ready to move from being a tactical buyer to a strategic leader, you're in the right place. Tune in and together we can build a better bottom line. I'm Aaron McMillan, editor of Procurement Magazine and your host for this podcast series. Today, we'll be discussing the critical issue of driving value through global procurement and resilient supply chains with our esteemed guest, Manish Lunker, President of Group Procurement and Strategy at Man Industries India. He has 30 years experience in the functional areas of marketing, sales, strategic planning, strategy deployment, business deployment, and has exposure to the entire steel value chain and markets for flat steel, downstream products, metallics, and minerals. Manish has worked at Jindal Steel and Power and KEC International. So let's get into today's episode. Hi, Manish. How's it going?
Hi, Aaron. It's good. Very happy to connect with you,
Yeah, great.
and looking forward to having a very good conversation.
Yeah, me too. Thanks so much for joining us today, Manish. So I was wondering to get the ball rolling. Could you tell us from a kind of personal level, what's the most unnecessarily complicated thing you've ever tried to source for yourself? Was it perhaps a piece of food you once had on holiday or a particular vinyl or something? Just what's the most, complicated thing you've ever tried to source for yourself?
We deal with a lot of technically difficult items. So at times when the product has only one or two manufacturers, and this is required very critically in the manufacturing, things like consumable items, welding electrodes, or the coating materials, they are really very difficult to get.
Perfect. I'm sure, over your 30 years of experience, you've had a kind of a lot of experience with dealing with those kind of things. But if we could bring it back to the start, could you tell me a bit more about kind of your journey into working into procurement?
In about 32 years in the industry, and I have handled across the entire value chain of manufacturing, especially steel and infrastructure. So I have handled marketing roles, sales roles, as well as a buyer. So handling products entire value chain of steel, which goes into the infrastructure building, has been really a very good experience. All of these things have consistently given me new learnings, and and in a way vision to do things in a better way every single day.
Perfect. And obviously, like you said, you've been in the industry for 32 years. You've kind of seen the evolution of procurement, often viewed as this kind of back office function, which primary goal was just to be a cost saving function. You yourself, you're a CPO who's also leads on strategy. How have you seen the role evolve into a primary driver of enterprise value? And what does it mean, to have a seat at the table in 2026?
Very true, Aaron. Actually, procurement has gone a fundamental shift from a cost control function to a value creation engine today. So earlier, success was measured by savings or what value we bring back to the company. But today, it's measured in terms of business continuity, in terms of risk management, and strategic enablement of the growth. So, having a seat at the table in 2026 means procurement is involved upstream in decision making and not downstream in execution alone. So we are now influencing market entry strategies, supplier ecosystem design, and even capital allocation decisions are being done with our inputs. So, in simple terms, procurement is no longer supporting the business, it is shaping the business.
Yeah, certainly. I think you speak to so many leaders now, and procurement has just become at the heart of everything good a business does. If they want to be a success, their procurement operation needs to be involved in all the decisions, like you said, up and down, upstream, downstream. It kind of needs to be everywhere. Has it been, is that something you've always held in your opinion since you've kind of started to work? Or have you kind of seen the more you've worked in your career, you've actually been like, well, hang on, we're actually so responsible for so much of the company's success?
Actually, procurement as a function in an organization has evolved over a period of last 2 to 3 decades. As I told you, it's no longer just a cost saving function. It's actually a strategic function where a lot of organizational decisions in terms of growth, in terms of expansions, in terms of which markets you exist are primarily now taken on basis of procurement. So yes, it's actually evolved in a big way over the past 2 to 3 decades.
This podcast is in partnership with Amazon Business. Amazon Business is your one-stop destination for everything your organization needs. Think of it as the Amazon you already know and love, but specifically re-engineered for the way you work. Amazon Business gives you access to business-only pricing on millions of items and quantity discounts that scale with your growth. It's about spending less time bogged down in those manual tasks and more time on what really matters. So head over to Amazon Business and make the power of Amazon work for you.
Is there a particular moment for you personally over the last, 2 to 3 decades where you've been working, where you've seen that up close? Was there a moment that sticks in your mind of when you kind of saw it evolve to that strategic function it is today?
So in fact, if we look at procurement as a strategic function, uh, there are a lot of things which now business can do only if there is a resilient procurement function. Like recent uh, geopolitical scenario which we are looking at now, there is a lot of challenge which all of us in procurement are facing. In fact a nightmare for most of us in procurement to actually ensure that what we have planned gets delivered. I can't tell you in words that the kind of challenges which today we are facing has been uh, unprecedented. So as a function over many years now, lot of things are more dependent on procurement to really deliver value to the end customer.
I'm so glad you brought up that word resilience because it's something that it's hammered home every time that, companies talk, people meet at conferences, podcasts like me and yourself, resilience is hammered home. You're in there working, you know that people want to have that resilience, but the reality often involves those kind of difficult trade-offs. For you personally, how do you balance the kind of traditional drive for cost optimization, with the modern necessity of risk mitigation or, regionalized sourcing, how do you now balance that to make sure that you are resilient?
You've hit the nail right, Aaron. Cost optimization has always been one of the critical functions of procurement. But now, this is the central dilemma in modern procurement. It's not about choosing one over the other, but it's about optimizing the balance between the cost optimization and the risk mitigation. So the shift is now from a lowest cost buying to a risk adjusted total cost. So, so we have to factor in, instead of just focusing on lowest cost, we have to look at the risks involved and then what is the total cost of ownership of that product. So in practical terms, the cheaper supplier with high disruption risk is no longer viable. A slightly higher cost, actually with an assured supply, often delivers much better value to the organization. And therefore, we approach this with a multi-source strategy uh, most procurement has to look at today. And obviously the scenario planning and the dynamic contracting with your suppliers, so that there is no risk, or the risk involved is mitigated. Because today the real cost does not include what you pay, it's what you lose. And when supply fails, it's actually the biggest loss.
Mm. And obviously for you, you work and you've worked throughout your career in steel, those raw material costs, specifically steel, they can fluctuate wildly. You're so dependent on the geopolitical standards of the world, and things can shift
True.
overnight. When things fluctuate so wildly, how have you built in framework or hedging strategies to kind of employ? What do you use to ensure that your global procurement remains a stabilizer for the company's bottom line rather than a variable risk?
Yeah. So Aaron, today we look at procurement as a stabilizing function, and not just a reactive one. So our approach is built on essentially four pillars. First, the sourcing diversification, to avoid any over dependence on a particular geography. Secondly, it also is about contractual flexibility to manage freight deviations or timelines or contingencies, stuff like these. And third, the market intelligence and indexation, to align the cost, the pricing, and the credible benchmarks which are available in the industry. And fourth, the inventory calibration to maintain the strategic buffers without locking any excess capital, but to make the entire supply chain more resilience. So in certain commodities, we also use even commodities like steel or iron ore or coking coal, which are the basic raw material. We also use price hedging and forward contracts to sort of balance our cost, or to avoid any fluctuations. So the objective is very simple: to convert procurement from a volatile amplifier into a shock absorber for the business.
Perfect. Manish, I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about your own kind of personal experiences with that kind of volatility that you work in. In a moment where everything shifts overnight, you as a leader, how do you stay calm in that situation? How have you managed to kind of, take it and move it and continue to drive value for the companies you work for?
So Aaron, I would say here the human touch or the personal connect comes into picture. So many times uh, your suppliers may have their own challenges, but it's always the constant engagement with them to really understand their side of the business as well, which actually helps in delivering the value. Because then you are not just as a buyer or a supplier, you are actually partner in the overall journey, and that helps a lot. In my personal experience, I've always seen that if you have a personal connect or a long term understanding with your suppliers, uh, it's those difficult times that these things really come handy, and deliver much more value to the organization than any transactional cost saving can do.
Yeah, those personal relationships obviously so vital for business to find success. You have to have that connection, and I'm sure that's even more relevant when we start talking about something like sustainability. You need that partnership to promote that, within your own company and with your suppliers, tier one, tier two, tier three. How do you go about integrating ESG metrics into that supplier selection process, and how do you incentivize your partners to reduce their global carbon footprint without, compromising on the scale in which you work at?
Oh, that's Aaron, a very relevant stuff today, when the whole world is talking about carbon footprint reduction. ESG's integration into procurement is really very important. And today, ESG is no longer just a compliance requirement. it's actually becoming a strategic differentiator. Uh, in supplier selection, we are actually integrating uh, carbon intensity metrics, energy sourcing profiles, and compliance with the global sustainability standards. However, the real challenge is the scale. So instead of enforcing, we focus on collaborating with the suppliers. So co-creating the energy transition roadmaps and aligning incentives with long-term partnerships, which is where they get that confidence. Because sustainable procurement cannot be transactional. It's about has to be collaborative and always progressive.
Yeah, you can be more correct there. Yeah, you have to have that collaboration. You have to be all pulling in the same direction. I think a lot of companies know the importance of it, so it's great to hear that is how they're being implemented. I think this is actually maybe a bit of a record. We've waited this long in the conversation to bring up AI, but we'll get to it now. So with that technology, the rise of AI, predictive analytics, how have your team moved from kind of reactive sourcing to proactive data-driven procurement? Is there a specific technology or digital tool that you believe has been a game changer for your global operations?
I must admit that we are clearly moving towards a scenario of reactive sourcing to a more predictive procurement. The whole world is actually moving towards that direction. The one who moves faster will always make the lead. So in today's decisions, the decisions are supported by real-time market intelligence. Uh, Things like freight and commodity tracking, and all the predictive risk indicators. The real game changer is not a single tool, I would say. It's an integration of data across the entire value chain, and how good you get the feel of that data and use it in your day-to-day decision making. So that said, spend analytics, supplier risk monitoring, and scenario modeling have significantly enhanced our decision quality. Uh, and actually, ultimately, technology does not replace your judgment. It's actually the technology. It augments your judgment with a foresight, which has been never before.
Perfect. And I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about, since AI has kind of evolved and become more of a use in your day to day, is there a particular moment that you can read pen on where you think, I'm so glad that I have this technology that now allows me to do this in my job?
I would, sorry, come again.
So, ever since kind of AI, predictive analytics become more readily available, is there kind of a moment you can remember from the last few years in which, how AI has helped you the most personally, something that you're really happy that the technology has allowed you to do?
So actually, we few years ago we worked on a predictive price prediction model, which has not been there in the industry till date. And working on that model actually gave us a lot of insights into uh, the various parameters that affect a commodity pricing, and the fact that if you develop a AI ML model to really do a scenario analysis and a forecast, uh, that is really something big. I'm not saying you have a model ready as on date, but yes, a lot of people are working on it. And as things evolve, these models will mature and give all of us much more power to take uh, knowledgeable decisions and the right decisions.
Perfect. And I think you can agree, Manish, over the course of our conversation, we've touched on many topics and areas in which a procurement leader now has to be well versed in order to drive success. Global procurement now requires that unique blend of cultural intelligence, negotiation skills, and technical expertise. For you, what is the one trait you look for in the next generation of supply chain leaders who will be managing these increasingly complex global networks?
If I have to choose one defining trait, I would say it would be business thinking with a risk mindset. The next generation must go beyond just negotiation skills. They need to understand the market and the geopolitics much more, interpret data very effectively, and think in terms of the enterprise impact and not just functional goals as we used to do in the past. So in today's environment, a good procurement leader actually saves cost. A great procurement leader protects value and ensures the business continuity. That's the shift we need for business going forward.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to bring this to a close. Now, before you go, I've got a few more questions for you. These ones are a bit rapid fire, so I don't want you to think as much. I just want you to kind of say what comes to mind straight away. So, in your opinion, what's the most exciting thing about the future of procurement?
I think AI's involvement in procurement decision making is really best.
Perfect. What is one thing people still get wrong about procurement?
One thing people get wrong.
Still get wrong about it, yeah.
I would say it's about the ability to influence everything. That's wrong. We are always we should be ready to tackle the situation, but we can't influence everything.
And what is one piece of technology we rely on now, which will be obsolete in a year?
I think the Excel sheets and the manual data logging which we have been doing. Now today you have tools available and those tools are much more mature. So we as a function and as a leader have to come out of the transactional things and focus more on the differentiators which we just talked about.
Perfect. And I was wondering if you could help us out with the next episode of the Procurement Magazine podcast. I was wondering if you could ask a question to our next procurement leader, what would it be?
Actually, in my view, procurement today sits at an intersection of strategy, risk, and value creation. So, and in an increasingly volatile world, as we call it, it's a VUCA world. The organization that treats procurement as a strategic lever and not just a support function will have a clear competitive edge. So what I intend to ask is, do we genuinely look at procurement as a business decision support function, or do we just look at it as a simple support function?
Great. Thank you so much, Manish. I look forward to posing that to our next interviewer. So I just want to thank you again, Manish, for your time today.
Thank you, Aaron.
And your expertise.
It's been a good,
great.
Good
Great. Thank you so much. And that's a wrap on this episode of the Procurement Podcast, brought to you by BizClick, Procurement Magazine, and our sponsors at Amazon Business. Thanks so much for joining us as we strategize our way through the wild world of procurement. Before you go, don't forget, we want to hear from you. Got a sticky supplier issue, a negotiation nightmare, or maybe you have an incredible procurement story to share and you want to appear on the show. Send us your burning questions or your speaker pitch. You can easily drop us a line at procurementmagazinepodcast@bizclickmedia.com. Please remember to email from your business email address, as all eligible emails will be entered into a draw to win 2 free tickets to Procurement Live, worth thousands. We'll be back next week to help you save more, source smarter, and maybe even get that promotion. Until then, keep those contracts tight and your value high. We'll see you next time.